Hello and welcome back to EcoFest, Eco Conversations. It's really great to have you all here again. Now we have a really interesting conversation. Over the past 6 months with lockdown, a lot of people have taken the opportunity to get on their bikes and start cycling a bit more with the roads being a bit quieter. And there was also a lot of discussion at the moment about active travel and safe travel and travel that doesn't emit as many emissions and reduces our carbon footprint. So for that reason, we are having a conversation now all about cycling, and I'm absolutely delighted to have with me today Dr. Alistair Jones and Emma Kemp, and also Roger from one of our congregations is here as well to have a discussion about everything that is to do with cycling. I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves first. So shall I start with you, Alistair? Would you like to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name's Alistair. I live in Stretford, just in the shadow of Old Trafford. And my things that I'm particularly passionate about in cycling is I am a member of Chorlton Velo. I was out cycling this morning, just went up Eccles Pike, which was great fun, beautiful day for it. I've also founded something called Cadence Ride, which is business networking for people that like riding a bike. And I'm also one of the organisers of the Tour de Manche, which is a cycling sportive that goes around Manchester.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much, Alistair. I'll come to you next, Emma.
My name's Emma Kemp. I work at Possible, which is a UK-based climate action charity, and we run various different campaigns, but quite a few of them are around active travel and more recently getting people cycling as lockdown lifted.
Fab, thank you. And Roger, do you want to say a quick hello too? You want to say a quick hello, Roger?
Oh, sorry, who am I?
Who are you?
Right, I'll go for that. I can cope. Sorry, I'm also deaf. I'm 72, very old. I used to teach geography in a school in Urmston, and I too live in Stretford. I didn't realise you lived in Stretford, Alistair. But I go to church at the place just behind Grace there. You can see the cross there, and I've been going to that church for about 40 years and cycling for a little bit longer.
And you do a lot of cycling, don't you, Roger? You go out and about on your bike in a lot of places.
I have. I will cycle to church even if my wife's driving to church, so that we both arrive at the same time, because cycling is just as quick.
It really is. It really is. Thank you. Emma, I'm going to come to you first to tell us a bit about yourself, particularly because I believe that you have a really good personal story about your own cycling journey as well. So I just wondered whether you'd like to share that with us.
Yeah, sure. So cycling is quite new for me, particularly in the city. I cycled a lot when I was a kid. I grew up in the countryside in Essex, and just cycling around my little cul-de-sac wearing my Batman outfit. That was my cycling gear of choice at the time. And I hadn't really cycled since then. I think I stopped cycling when I was about 10, 11. And then since I've lived in London the last 5 years, obviously working at a climate charity, and I think I was pretty much always the only person in the office who didn't cycle. I found the roads really intimidating. I couldn't really comprehend how I would go about doing that. It just seemed too much for me. And then when lockdown was about to come in and everything was a bit, and we didn't know what kind of transport was going to be available, me and my housemate kind of panic went and bought bikes. We weren't stocking up on food. We were just panic buying the bikes. And so that, that was brand new for me. So I've kind of had to relearn cycling all over again. And it's been so good. It's been so nice. I think lockdown was a really great time to learn because obviously the roads were relatively quiet. I was cycling to pick up a veg box, my local veg box, very wholesome. Since it started to lift, I've started cycling into the office as well, which has been great. It's given me a lot of freedom.
And that's really interesting, Emma, because I too have started cycling since lockdown. I cycled when I was a child, really on a rusty old bike around my cul-de-sac, and didn't really cycle at all after that. And always thought I'd love to do it, but was absolutely terrified about going on the roads. But braved it in lockdown, and it has absolutely changed my perspective and my whole life, really. The physical and mental health benefits, which we'll talk about, as well as the environmental benefits, have been really major, and I'm really really grateful that for this opportunity to have been able to do that, really. It's been a terrible time in lockdown. There's been lots of really awful moments and moments of real grief and isolation, but there've also been a few glimpses of positivity and good news coming out of it. And I think the way we're thinking about travel and the way we're thinking about our world in general is one of those things that has come much more out of lockdown too. Roger, I don't know whether you wanted to ask the next question.
Yeah, I said earlier that I've cycled since I know not when. Alistair, how long have you cycled?
Well, I used to cycle to my secondary school, and I was a trombonist. So I think I've got back problems now that are from when I used to cycle my bike. I had a Rally Olympus, which was kind of one of those friction gears and all that sort of thing. And my trombone sort of going like this, so trying to balance it in one direction. And I lived it was about a 15-minute bike ride. It was either that or 45 minutes walk. And basically I was inherently lazy, and I knew that cycling was a good way to get to school. So I would cycle with my trombone. So yeah, there we go. So I used to do that. Unfortunately, it was relatively flat where I lived in South London when I was growing up, and obviously now I live in Stretford. It's pretty flat in this bit of Manchester too. But I haven't been cycling with a trombone for a very long time. But yeah, I kind of took up my recent renaissance in cycling was when I got injured running. My back injuries meant that I had to move over to the bike about 8 years ago, and I've been part of Chalk Velo for about 6 or 7 years since then.
The cycling, you said you carried a trombone. I have 3 bikes and I carry different things regarding what I'm carrying. I've got a road bike which I got into last year, so we'll cycle coast to coast 170, 180 miles. Yeah. This year we just had to cancel our ride up to around the Lakes Loop. That's about 180 again. Because of COVID, there were 12 of us going week after next, and we've just had to cancel, even though we booked it way back in October. And similarly, I carry bricks in my ordinary Claude Butler bike. And then I've got a mountain bike as well that I don't use much because I'm not good on hills. What do you carry stuff to and from work, Alistair, with your bike?
So I do have the mandatory 3 bikes. When you become a cyclist, I'm told I learned very quickly you need at least 3 bikes.
Yeah.
I just got rid of my mountain bike because I just found I couldn't ride it anymore with a bad back. So I actually own 3 road bikes, and I have one for the winter with mod guards and that I don't mind carrying things on, and then another road bike that I kind of use in the summer, and then one I've just given to my son who's returned from university, so he can get around during lockdown and use that. But when I'm carrying things, I generally keep to a rucksack or something like that now, and kind of keep it a bit there. I have used panniers, and I've done a bit of road touring as well, a little bit, but I don't have them on the bike permanently.
Yeah, and I bought my first proper bike from Foster's in Chorlton near Stratford. and I wanted something fancy, and he led me gently over to one side and said, if you're carrying books to school, you want this bike, not those bikes. So I listened to what he said, and so I've carried on cycling to church with my music in one side, and I have cycled with my guitar on my back, but I haven't. So has your faith altered your cycling, Alistair?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that, because actually I've been involved in running a retreat, a spiritual retreat, thinking about how being a cyclist changes our attitude and also the connection that we have, but in that space, in our well-being, but also our spiritual connection as well. So I've run a couple of Christian retreats. I ran one at Cliff College. I ran one down at Lawn Abbey as well. Unfortunately, we had to postpone this year's, so hopefully we're running it next year at Lawn Abbey. But if you check their website, we do that. But yeah, I've definitely found it helpful. A friend of mine who lives over in Sheffield asked me to come over and kind of help lead a bike ride that he called Church on a Bike last year. And typically that day, the heavens opened about 2 minutes before we started our bike ride, and continued to rain all the way around. So it was somewhat soggy Church on a Bike, but it was but really interesting. But yeah, I definitely find that my faith and the way that I connect with God, the way that I express who I am and my spirituality is yeah, it really impacted when I'm out there on a bike, and I feel that connection. I think with both with creation, but also with my own faith journey. I really do connect with that.
I find it allows me to forgive more people more often, because motorists are not nice to cyclists. So sometimes I get angry, and then I've got to say sorry myself. You know.
I try to smile and wave a lot, even when people are being, pretty nasty, because I kind of figure if you're smiling and you're waving, it's a bit like the penguins in that cartoon.
Madagascar.
Yeah, Madagascar, that's the one. Smile and wave, boys. That's what I say when we're out in the club and people are sort of tooting and cutting us up, or maybe even trying to, do worse.
These are really good tips for me, actually, as I'm cycling in the city with motorists. These are really good tips that I'm going to remember. Both yourself, Alistair, and Emma, you're involved in some really fantastic cycling schemes, ways of encouraging people, either whether they be new to cycling or whether more experienced. Emma, I wondered whether you could tell us something about the way that you do. I know you do something called Climate Perks, and also the Stride and Ride campaign, which is something that I've become involved in, just on a personal level, become involved in. And it's just really interesting to sort of hear about those different ways of encouraging low carbon and active travel.
So Stride and Ride is the one which is more kind of cycling focused. That was our campaign that, as I said, we're a climate action charity. So all of our campaigns are looking at helping people and supporting the public to choose more low carbon lifestyles. And some of our work is a little bit more technical, like we, for example, invented a way to plug solar into the railways for the first time a couple of years ago. So that's another venture. So some of our work is quite techy, and other things are kind of behavior change. But Stride and Ride is, we kind of identified, probably not the only ones, that there was a risk that as lockdown lifted, people were going to feel very nervous to use public transport, and that it might become the roads might become really, really traffic choked, even more so, than they already were, particularly in the cities. And so we wanted to just do some kind of, sort of public campaign to encourage people to choose more active transport, whether that's cycling or, skateboarding, running, walking, or any of the scooting. People also do that. It was just focused on encouraging people to choose them instead. And the idea was that people took a pledge to take 5 sustainable journeys within a couple of weeks. And now there's also, they can pledge to do more. They can pledge to do sort of, 25K in sustainable journeys, or 100K. And there's a chance to win a Brompton bike, I think, at the moment. It's my colleague Max who heads up that campaign. The campaign I head up is Climate Perks, which it's kind of adjacent. It's more of a sustainable travel campaign, or maybe an initiative, you might call it. It's basically working with employers to support their staff to take low carbon holidays. And the focus is more on encouraging people to take trains and ferries internationally rather than fly. So slightly different to kind of local kind of cycling, but still very relevant to this cause in terms of how we move around, and how we can do that more sustainably, because flying is just, it's so bad. There's no real getting around it. It's in the UK actually, there's some interesting stats on it, like the UK, people fly more than any other nation per person. 1 in 12 international travelers is British. So we really are kind of the hub of that behavior here. So Climate Perks is kind of working with employers to encourage behavior change, and reward staff by giving them the extra journey time that they need to take sustainable transport. So if it's going to take them an extra day to get to, you know, Rome by train, then their employer will give them an extra day off, paid as if they were in the office to get there. So not extra holiday, more like kind of like volunteer leave, but instead of you know, volunteering, you're taking a low carbon transport. Yeah.
That sounds absolutely amazing, and a really good way to encourage people to use those more, you know, more environmentally friendly modes of transport. And I hadn't realised that about UK flight habits. So that's really interesting to know that as well. Thanks for that, Emma. Alistair, do you want to tell us a bit about what you do then in your various initiatives that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure. I suppose the main thing really to talk about is Tour de Manche. What we try and do is we try and make it a sportive which isn't just for mammals. So I'm a mammal, one of those middle-aged men in lycra. But with Tour de Manche, part of our ethos is about trying to be a force for good through cycling. So not only do all of our ticket prices and everything all go towards local charities in Manchester, but we also get sponsorship from businesses and try and kind of involve the business community. So right up until when we had to postpone, we were due to be running the Tour de Manche in a week's time, but because of all of the local lockdowns and actually the rising hour rate, we were asked by councils not to do that and bring 1,000 people into Greater Manchester to ride through those particularly high-risk boroughs. Right up until that point, we had businesses that were going to pay for bananas and the food and the sealed sandwiches that we were going to have, which normally we would try not to do. We'd normally get volunteers to make those and everything, but obviously, for COVID's sake, we were going to do that. But our key thing really is about increasing participation. So as I said, part of our ethos, we do taster rides on Tour de Manche. So on Thursday night, I led a little group out to Werneth Low, that's the hardest hill that we do on Tour de Manche. And unfortunately, it's part of the short route and the long route. But if you can get over Werneth Low, whether you push or you walk up it or you cycle all the way up it, once you've done that bit, you know that the rest of the route is actually quite doable, because it's a kind of a bit pointy, that hill. So we've been doing it on a Thursday night quite regularly, even sort of through lockdown, in groups of 6 or no more, and we call it Werneth Low Fight Club, but you're not allowed to tell anyone that. Okay, so yeah, it's just a kind of a way of doing it, and it's great. So this Thursday we had 2 people that had never ridden it before. The other week we did it, and I think there were about 6 or 7 people who hadn't done it before, when we had 2 groups that night. And again, what we're also trying to do is increase our diversity within that. So we're particularly targeting women, because there's a lot more blokes that cycle than women, and I think certainly my wife doesn't feel safe on the roads, and I completely understand that. So we're just trying to make that more accessible, and actually also we've reached out to the LGBT community, which is a really important part of our city, and we want to celebrate that diversity and try and have as many people from different parts of our community that get on their bikes and really enjoy that. So those 2 things I think that we do, and yeah. This year we were looking to have the biggest Tour de Manche ever, and sadly we've just had to postpone, as I said, to the 2nd of May. So hopefully by then the worst of what we're going through may be gone through. Whether or not we've got a vaccine by then, I don't know. My background is a scientist, and I would really love to think that we've got that, but if we don't, then we'll be managing this for the next few years in some way or another. But ultimately, we hope that we can run the event properly on the 2nd of May. And also, we recognise there's lots and lots of people that have that raise money for charity. Not only do they raise money for charity through us, and obviously the profit that we make, all of the profit that we make in our organisation, we're a registered charity, and the company that runs Tour de Manche is asset locked. Everything, all the profit, all goes into our charity, and we disperse that to local charities. but also people run for will ride for their own charities. They'll get sponsored for that. So in order to help that this year, we're doing a virtual event, and that's actually coming up. If you look on the Tour de Mac website and you look on our social media, you can find how to get involved in that, and you can get yourself a medal and everything, so that you've got something to prove to people that you've actually done that, either 100 miles or 100k. And the idea is you don't have to do the route that we lay out, because obviously that goes through some areas which may or may not be safe, but you do, and we don't want to tie everyone to one route, so we've got lots of people going congesting streets. But actually what we're going to do is say you ride that distance wherever you are in the country, or even if you're in another country. One of our organisers is stuck in Spain at the moment, the wrong side of the quarantine laws, but he'll be riding it over there, and a number of us will all be doing that kind of 100-mile ride. So yeah, really encourage you to do that and raise money for your local charities. They really need it. I used to run a youth work charity, a national youth work charity, and I know that every charity at the moment is really feeling it. And as we go into that kind of that time of recession when there's fewer funds around, anything that you can do to help your local charities and support those community action groups, they'll really benefit from that.
Can I ask Emma a question?
Yeah, of course you can, Roger.
Emma, you said that, and I love that idea of employees giving a day to do an extra travel. The other one is when you do get to work, as you get older, you get a little bit sweatier rather than being nice, smooth skinned young person. And a lot of workplaces don't have showers and changing facilities. And I think that could be something that your group could promote, because I know that when I got to school, I would slow down the last half a mile so that I looked in a reasonable state once I get there. Is there anything that your group do to promote that?
It's a good point. And we don't have showering facilities at my work, and we're all cyclists, so we feel your pain. As a climate charity, we're obviously on like limited budgets, and we have very cheap rent in our office space in Camden. So although everyone's very keen for a space like that, we just keep going for the cheap rent instead. Because it's very reasonable and it's a good space. But yeah, so we feel the pain. I think for offices or for small organizations like us, where it can be quite difficult to try and, find the money to cover something like that, then if you've got like local gyms, like a lot of us are members of our local gym, which is the gym, that brand, which is very cheap. It's sort of £14 a month or something. So a lot of people might cycle in, but then do a little class there, or do a little workout, or just go and use the showers. So that can be a good little hack if your office space just can't really accommodate for that. But we would like to see more people introducing that in office spaces. And it might be something that would make sense to do alongside offices that have the Cycle to Work scheme in particular. So I think there's not even just one Cycle to Work scheme, is there? There's quite a few Cycle to Work schemes, and they're super useful. And I know that we'd like to speak to Cycle to Work at some point to talk to them about, any kind of collaborations we can do in terms of climate perks, with that being an employee benefit scheme as well. So yeah, I mean, watch this space. Maybe this is something that we can work on. But yeah, I think it's super important, because it does make it so much easier.
It was a good reply, that, in that it reminded me, my son used to work for Ernst & Young in Manchester, and he had the problem there. So he would go to a gym in Manchester, somewhere near Deansgate, and then go into work. I wonder if some of the clubs could do a cheaper membership for people going in, simply to use the showers, because there are no public showers nowadays, are there?
No. Was there once public showers? That sounds like a fun world.
There were Roman baths.
Even better.
A long time
ago are we talking?
The other thing that also, because I cycle into work, I've got a shared workspace, obviously not for the last 6 months, but when I'm working in Manchester, I cycle into an office in Castlefield in the XYZ building. They've got a great cycle hub, and they've also got storage in the building for bikes that's secure, that you're able to access. And I think that's another key thing, particularly sort of in Manchester. You want to know your bike's going to be there when you go home, or it's not going to have the saddle or the front wheel removed, so that you're able to get home. So I think that's another key thing. And I know that's something that Chris Baldwin's been really thinking about with the cycle strategy. So yeah.
Absolutely, and security is a big thing, and we've heard, haven't we, over lockdown, that whilst more people have taken up cycling, cycle thefts have also increased, and so there is there is an issue there that is worth looking at in terms of workplaces and things like that as well. We've talked a bit about lockdown and COVID, and about unfortunately having to not do certain events and that kind of thing, unfortunately, because of it. But also people have taken up cycling more and have not only just noticed that it's better for the environment, but also your physical and your mental health improves so much when cycling. And Alistair, I know that you've got a particular story about this, really, which I've just found really interesting, and I think others might do too. So do share.
Yes, well, it was, I remember the date clearly. It was May the 13th, 2018, and I was cycling out with my cycling club. I'd bunked off church that morning on a Sunday to go and do some training, and yeah, I had a bit of a headache. Didn't feel very well that day, and then it got really bad, that headache, so much so that as we were cycling past Stockport station, by the time we got to Marple, I really wasn't feeling very well. So I told the rest of the cycling group, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to Stretford, and of course they offered, oh, are you okay? Does someone need to come back with you? I said, oh no, completely fine. Obviously being a complete bloke, and then I cycled back home to Stretford. So I did about a 40 kilometre return ride to Marple and back. And then when I got home, after continually being sick, I kind of dialed NHS 111. I'm not really feeling very well. Is it possible to see a doctor later today? I ended up on the floor in the bathroom with an ambulance being called, and when my wife got home, yeah, I was being rushed to Salford Royal Hospital with a brain hemorrhage. So I'd actually cycled quite a long way with a grade 1 brain hemorrhage. Now I'm very lucky; it was the lowest level of brain hemorrhage. It was a small bleed in the return in a capillary. I probably had about half an egg cup full of blood in sort of swimming around in my subarachnoid area and my spinal column. But yeah, I'd just gone self-employed about 6 months earlier than that, and yeah, it was a little bit concerning at the time for the family and everything else, particularly as it was a brain hemorrhage actually that caused my father to pass away. But my brain hemorrhage was very different. It wasn't a burst artery or an aneurysm. It was just this tiny little bleed. But actually, I think personally, through my own cycling, through the fact that I was relatively healthy because I cycle quite a lot anyway, and then I basically kind of treated it almost like a training program. How can I get back healthy again? I went walking. I wasn't allowed to cycle, wasn't allowed to drive for obvious reasons. But when I went back to the consultant about 7.5 weeks later, he said, well, you're probably too healthy to be here sitting in front of me today. You're absolutely fine. You can drive home. So I was really, really lucky, and I still count myself very fortunate for that. But yeah, I suppose I always have that story that I cycled sort of 30 kilometers probably with a brain hemorrhage, and all of the doctors, of course, in the hospital, whenever they asked, so how did you do that? And of course, you got off the bike when that happened, didn't you? And then got some help. No, no, I didn't. So I think they're all kind of fairly bewildered as to why I would do that. But I think sometimes you kind of push through things when you're doing sport, and sometimes not necessarily for the right reasons, or sometimes with a lot of ignorance, you potentially put yourself at quite a lot of risk. So yeah, that's just a word to the wise there of perhaps I should have listened to someone else and got some help that day.
But you also did say that cycling and because you were cycling and now cycle, that's helped a lot with your recovery, didn't it? And so you were in a better position to recover from it, having being a regular cyclist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they said because those of us in clubs generally have slightly lower heart rate. I've got relatively high blood pressure, which I kind of take a small bit of medication for. But I think kind of doing that regular exercise, and also for me, my well-being, and just that release, that first day that he said it was the 4th of July, so it's my Independence Day. He said, yeah, you can go for a bike ride again. I went out for 2 hours that night, rather than taking it easy and taking his advice, because I went out for 2 hours, I was exhausted and couldn't cycle again for another week. But it was just magic that evening. It was a sunny evening, and just the feeling of being able to be out there and have that freedom. And I know that's certainly something for me that I felt during lockdown. During that initial lockdown, when we were being very, very, very close guarded, I didn't go very far at all. But once conditions were relaxed a bit more and I was able to go further, it certainly helped me with my sanity, with my well-being, and it certainly helped my wife because it meant she got a break from me being in the house as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to finish in a minute, but I want to ask all three of you as cyclists in your various capacities. Lots of people are thinking about cycling now. We're thinking about active travel. We're thinking about how we can reduce our carbon footprint. What bits of advice or encouragement would you give to anybody who is thinking, I'd really like to get on my bike and cycle a bit more, but I'm not sure how to, or maybe I'm a bit nervous? What encouragement, advice, support do you think would be helpful? If I come to you first, Emma.
I would say definitely reach out to your friends who are cyclists, because most people who cycle will cycle quite regularly and they know the roads well. You can get people to come with you and like buddy you. For me, as being someone who's commuting, cycling now, quite a few of my colleagues have come and met me at my house and then cycled in with me, and it's just been so helpful. I think without that I would have been so nervous. But yeah, cycling with more experienced cyclists is the most useful thing I've found. And also just making sure you have the right kit. I think if you're going to be using Google Maps or any kind of mapping tool, then you want to get one of those, what are they called? Like phone holders that go at the front of your bike, so that you're not, I mean, when I first got on it, I was kind of like trying to look at my phone and cycle at the same time. Not very safe. So you want your phone to be well positioned in front of you, so you don't have to be grappling around when you're trying to learn a new thing. And just play it safe and take it easy. Start on the smaller roads, start on the back roads, go through parks until you feel really stable in what you're doing. And then, yeah, just make sure you're going with other people initially. And you can look online. If you don't know anyone who's a cyclist, you can look online. There's if you search Bike Buddy, there's various websites where you can find people to link up with.
Well, that's really helpful to know. Thanks for that, Emma. What about you, Roger? What tips would you give to somebody starting out?
Don't go too far. There was a friend actually from church, Julie, was saying that, oh, I've got myself a new bike, I'll cycle to Blackpool or somewhere. And I wouldn't. I would aim to cycle something like 10, 15 miles at the most for the first few weeks, then increase it to 20 miles if you can, and then get on to possibly something longer. I did 42 miles last Friday, not having done that distance for a long while, around the Peak District and a bit of Derbyshire and Cheshire. And I was absolutely tired out. I shouldn't have done it. I should have gone back to pretending to be a beginner again, because I'd not done 20 miles for a while. So don't do too much. And as Emma said, plan where you are going first. You don't need an Ordnance Survey map. And you might be into Google, Emma. I love Google when I'm on my computer here. I'm looking at my computer. But I prefer Maps.me, totally free, totally offline. And before you go, you can actually just put a little star at each major corner that you're going to. And when you get to that point, you know that you're going to the next little star somewhere on your computer. Well, not computer, on your phone. Yes, that's what it is. So yeah, use Maps.me and don't go too far.
So that's really helpful. Know your limitations, because if we do set ourselves too big a target straight away, we're likely to become a little bit despondent, aren't we, if we don't make it? So starting small and recognizing your limitations is a good tip, really. Alistair, what about yourself?
Well, I think some great advice there from Emma and also from Roger, and which is really what I would say. Find someone who you can ride with. But I suppose the only other key thing that I would add to that is don't give up, try again, keep persevering. And yes, there are some days it rains and some days when it's sunny. You might want to try the days when it's not raining to start with, but eventually you'll probably find you actually quite enjoy even cycling through the rain. In Manchester, we call it liquid sunshine, don't we? So it's a kind of a way of getting that extra blessing.
Well, I mean, if you live in Manchester, you're going to have to cycle in rain, aren't you? Yeah. So, you know.
And that's where the good kit and good mudguards can really help as well. Recommend them.
On a personal level, as I think I've said several times now, so I'm sorry to my viewers if you've heard this all day, but I like Emma, I started cycling during lockdown and took a lot of those tips on. But a big tip that I would give myself is, particularly if you live in Manchester, Transport for Greater Manchester have a great scheme where you can get 6 hours free cycling tuition. And that is what I did, because that pushed me a little bit out of my comfort zone, but not too much, but it really sort of enabled me and gave me the confidence to get out on the road. So maybe a cycling tuition, if that's available, or somebody who's going to be with you but it's also going to push you a little bit out of your comfort zone, because what I was finding before was I was going out cycling with my husband, and when he tried to push me out of my comfort zone, I say, no, I'm not doing that. And that was that. Whereas a cycling instructor did, and I listened to them, because I couldn't really argue with a cycling instructor, but I can argue with my poor husband. And so that's how I got much more confident, really. So out with friends, out with more experienced people, know your limitations, but do push yourself a little bit when you can, because it's worth it in the end. And I think we'll all agree that cycling has so many benefits, far more benefits than we might have first imagined, really, in terms of, like I say, not just the carbon footprint, not just the joy you have of cycling past traffic in traffic jams and thinking this is wonderful because I'm going much faster than you, but also the mental health and physical well-being benefits are just fantastic, aren't they, as well?
And financial.
Financial, absolutely. Financial benefit, yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for joining us in this conversation today. It's been really, really good, and I really appreciate all the time that you've taken. So thank you very much, and keep the conversations going at home. If you've got any questions, just put them in the comments below the YouTube channel. Goodbye.
Excellent. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Smile and wave.